Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League, from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered, from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Welcome into another edition of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. It is Monday, March 8th. Hopefully you guys had a fantastic weekend out there. A lot of great sports action taking place. We had the NBA All-Star Game here going on Sunday night. As of time of recording, unfortunately, my guys from Philadelphia, Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, they had to sit out because their barber, the guy who cuts their hair, tested positive for coronavirus, contact tracing, all of that good stuff. But should be a fun time tonight. We had Bryson DeChambeau win the golf tournament this weekend. College basketball wrapping up its regular season. So hopefully you guys enjoyed watching some sports out there, enjoyed the weather. We should hit 60 degrees here in the Northeast this upcoming week. So we're finally getting a taste of spring. We're finally heading towards spring and summertime, and that means baseball. And we got a fantastic show lined up for you guys here today. Here at the top of the show, we're going to talk about free agency. We had the last two big dominoes to fall. The two top names remaining signed this offseason. Then we're going to get into some updates throughout segment number 2, talk about spring training, and then finally wrap up with my Manager of the Year conversation, since I've been predicting all of the awards here for the upcoming season. So thanks for tuning in. Once again, hit like, hit subscribe, check us out wherever you're listening to this. But let's jump right in. Segment number 1, we got free agent signings. I'm going to start with the smaller names who have signed here over the past couple of days, starting out with outfielder Jarrod Dyson, who signed with the Kansas City Royals on a 1-year, $1.5 million deal. Jarrod is a center fielder, will be in the rotation for the Royals, most likely a fourth outfielder for them, a platoon guy. He comes over from the Chicago White Sox. He spent 2020, started out in Pittsburgh, and then was traded over to the White Sox. Didn't play in a ton of games for either team, 32 total games. He hit 157 in Pittsburgh, and then ultimately went just 3 for 10 during his time with the White Sox. But 11-year veteran in the big leagues. He's had time with Arizona, Seattle, as well as 7 years back in Kansas City, where he started his career. So he's reuniting with the Royals, where he is a career .260 hitter. He has 100 home runs, or 100 RBIs on 7 home runs. Read the wrong box score there on baseballreference.com. But I like the move for the Royals. I think they could be an underrated team this year. I think they're going to be improved from last year, but I just see the rest of the division being too tough for them to really make a deal or make a move here moving forward. I mean, the top with the White Sox, the Twins, the Indians, and then, of course, the Royals, the Tigers should be at the bottom end of the division. But Kansas City could surprise some people, as we talked about during our over-under when it came to their win total being in the low 70s. That was on point with last year's win total, if you were to expand that over 162. So I certainly see how they came up with that number. But I think they could overachieve just slightly when it comes to those numbers. But Dyson returns to Kansas City, where he spent his first 7 years on a 1-year, $1.5 million deal. Next on the list, we got relief pitcher Jose Alvarez. He's going over from Philadelphia, where he spent the last 2 years. After spending the previous 5 out in L.A., he signs a 1-year, $1.15 million deal with the San Francisco Giants. A left-handed relief pitcher for them. Honestly, he was the only one who was any good in Philadelphia's bullpen last year. He didn't appear in a ton of games, and he was very good in 2019 as well. He had a 3.36 during the last full Major League season, over 59 innings, and then last year only gave up 1 run in 6 1/3 for the Phillies. So he's starting to bounce around a little bit, go from team to team, but you're getting a good big leaguer. 3.59 career ERA over 340 innings. He spent 2019 with Gabe Kapler in Philadelphia, so there is that managerial connection when it comes to the Giants out west. Kapler should know how to use them. Of course, Kapler, big analytics guy. You would think a lot of lefty-lefty situations for Alvarez in San Francisco, but the guy gets outs. Honestly, I liked him during his time in Philadelphia, so I think this is a nice signing for the Giants at just over $1 million. I don't see a lot of risk when it comes to adding Jose Alvarez. The last small guy to talk about, not small guy, but you guys get what I'm saying out there, is Ryan Topera. He re-signs with the Chicago Cubs. He gets $800,000. He spent 2020 in Chicago, went 20 innings to a 3.92 ERA for the Cubbies, career 3.66 ERA after spending the first 5 years of his career in Toronto, where he had a 3.64 ERA. So, solid big league picture. Chicago just bringing back value, not spending a ton of money. And like I said earlier, I think they're going to be big sellers when it comes to the deadline with upwards of, I think, 15 potential free agents this offseason. Now, of course, not all 15 are going to move on, but the fact is you're going to want to sell off a lot of those guys, try to get some prospects back at the deadline. So Topera coming back on a cheap one-year deal, a nice move there for the Cubbies. Now we get to the top two remaining free agents. You guys have heard about it by now. Jackie Bradley Jr. signs with the Milwaukee Brewers on a 2-year, $24 million deal. He does, however, have an opt-out after the first season in Milwaukee, which I think was huge for getting him to sign there and not re-sign with the Red Sox, which pretty much the entire industry thought was a given. And the way the contract is breaking down is he's going to get $13 million in year one. Then that next year is $11 million, but he does have an opt-out. Milwaukee is also going to have deferred money in the deal, and this is where it's kind of best case for Jackie Bradley Jr., because a lot of times you don't want to take a one-year prove-it deal, even though the anticipation is that more money will be available next offseason with the hopes that fans will be back in the stands, teams will have more money to spend by the end of the year as the vaccine continues to roll out. But I like this for Jackie Bradley Jr. I also really like this for the Brewers. I'm going to be honest with you. I mean, looking into it in Milwaukee, adding the defense up the middle, like in the NFL, you talk about building your team from the inside out. You start at the line of scrimmage, then you work outside. Well, in baseball, you want to be strong up the middle. Catcher's position, pitching position, second base, shortstop, center field. And with the recent additions of Colton Wong, who's a Gold Glove winning second baseman and is fantastic defensively, as well as now a Gold Glove winning center fielder in Jackie Bradley Jr., they got exactly what they're looking for. As well as you're going to have Lorenzo Cain opting back in. He opted out last year after about 5 or 6 games. He's a former Gold Glove winner, so you move him most likely over to left field. You get Christian Yelich back to his normal self out there in right field, and that outfield of Cain, Bradley, and Yelich is much deeper than it was even a little bit ago. So the Brewers are setting up nicely to possibly challenge the Cardinals in the NL Central, but they're going to understand here, and something else I've been hearing throughout the industry, that is, with the baseball, we talked about deadening the baseball, there's a thought process that more balls may stay in play. They may not end up as home runs, but potential outs in center field if you can run the ball down. And with an outfield of Cain, Bradley, and Yelich, you're going to have guys that can get to these balls in the gaps, get to the wall, and make a nice play. So they're putting more emphasis on defense in Milwaukee, knowing that their starting rotation isn't a huge strikeout rotation. Of course, you got Williams in the pen, Hader in the pen. They're much more strikeout dominant. But from the starting rotation purposes, a lot of balls in play, and you're going to have to catch the ball and make plays if you're going to get outs there in Milwaukee. So a nice move for the Brewers as well, and not just defensively for JBJ. I mean, offensively, he's a career, he only has a 239 average, but the last couple of years been much better. 283 last year, typically right around 240. Hits about 10 to 20 home runs. He's been as high as 26. He had 7 in a shortened season last year. So adding his offense, hitting from the left side, Again, you get Kane back on the right side, put Yelich in there. I think Milwaukee certainly got better with the signing of JBJ, both offensively and defensively when it comes to the overall team. The last free agent, the last big one to sign was Jake Odorizzi, and he signed with the Houston Astros. Now, the exact details of his deal are they're still filtering out here, but it is a 2-year deal plus a player option for a third year, and it looks like it's going to be $30+ million up front in those 2 years, which is right along the lines of his market. Last year, he played on the qualifying offer at just under 18, so him getting 15+ over the next 2 years, certainly a nice signing, and I think this was well played by Odorizzi. He was somebody who wasn't going to jump at a 1-year deal. He was going to kind of wait to see how teams filtered out, and with Houston now dealing with injuries in the rotation, not only did they lose Verlander, which everybody knew, but here recently their new ace, I have air quotes up, but their new top guy at the rotation, Framber Valdez, injured a finger on his throwing hand, and it looks like he's going to need surgery and could miss the entire year, if not most of it. So you lose Verlander, then you lose Valdez. You also have prospect Forrest Whitley, who recently saw a doctor about some elbow issues, tenderness, and it looks like he has a strain in the UCL. Tommy John surgery has been suggested, so a possible internal candidate to fill this role is no longer an option for them. So it certainly lends them to go out and get Odorizzi to kind of fill in this rotation. So now you have Greinke, McCullers, Odorizzi, you got Javier, Urquidy behind him. So it's still a nice rotation in Houston, and it's a good move for them. It'll just be interesting to see how the deal breaks down. So they want to stay under that 210 luxury tax and not pay those extra percentages. So will it be deferred money? Will it be 5 this year and 25 next year? How are they going to work that out with Odorizzi? But he played the market well, waited for somebody to get hurt, finds a deal he likes, and he ends up in Houston. And from Houston's perspective, after Valdez went down, Whitley's going down, I like them adding Odorizzi to try to stay at the top of that AL West division, which is certainly up for grabs and can be argued between 3 or 4 different teams. So those were the big guys who signed in free agency. We also have an extension to talk about with the Kansas City Royals. Hunter Dozier, third baseman, first baseman, bit of an outfielder for them, homegrown guy there in Kansas City. He signed a 4-year, $25 million extension with a player option for the 5th year at $10 million. So we'll call it 5 and 35 when it comes to the deal. But the deal is also laced with incentives. So if he plays a certain number of games, hits a certain number of statistics, the escalators could take this up to $49 million over 5 years. So he has $14 million, or just shy of $3 million a year, that he could add on to this deal, hitting those escalations. And the length of this deal, the 5 years, when you look at it from the player option perspective, this will eat up 2 years of his free agent eligibility. So the deal starts this year. They're then working through the arbitration eligible years and the additional 2 years of free agency, which again, at 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, depending on how those escalators hit, could be a nice deal for them. Because, yes, he's been up for 4 years, but it's really been 3 full years in Kansas City. A career 253 hitter. 2 years ago in 2019, hit 279 with 26 home runs and 84 RBIs. During the shortened season, 228, 6 homers, 12 RBIs, so struggled a bit last year, but did he have trouble getting going in 2 months? Would he have figured it out? Would he have gotten hot? A lot of variables and questions there when it comes to how he performs. But Kansas City locks up one of their core young guys and certainly looks to put him in the corner infield position over the course of the next 4 to 5 years. And I like what Kansas City's doing. They're trying to keep him through this rebuild, and he'll still be under contract relatively cheap when they think it's their next window to possibly contend. So who's left out there on the market? Who do we still have available? Well, I did some digging. I came up with some names. Some of them may never find a job. Some of them may retire. But going position by position, the top 1 or 2 guys who are still available out there to be signed, starting with the catcher's position, and I have their career WAR, or wins above replacement here as well. But you start out with Tyler Flowers, 35 years old, but a 2.5 wins above replacement, so he's possibly looking at a one-year deal if somebody gets injured. You also have Matt Wieters, who's 35 years old. He's got a negative 0.3 WAR, so I don't know if he'll find an opportunity. Jumping over to first base, you got Jed Jerko, 32 years old, 0.1 WAR. Logan Morrison, 33 years old, minus 0.3 WAR, so not a lot of depth available still at first base. Rotating now to second base, you got Neil Walker, Logan Forsythe, 35, 34 years old. Those guys would be bench guys, rotational guys. The biggest one potentially left available is third baseman Maikel Franco. Only 28 years old. He's had some nice years. He was super frustrating to watch here in Philadelphia because he gets extremely pool happy. And if he would just learn how to use the entire field, he could be very good. He's got a 0.8 WAR, so he's out there. Zach Cozart at the age of 35. Nobody really at the shortstop position out there is left. When you look at left fielders, there's not a lot available. Ryan Braun is opting out. He's a free agent, but he's not going to play. Nobody really in center field. And when it comes to right fielders, you have Yasiel Puig, still only 30 years old, even though it feels like we've been talking about him for a long, long time. He's got a 1.2 wins above replacement. You also have Josh Reddick at age 34, Eduardo Nunez at age 34, and then Nick Markakis, but, he's kind of opting out, looking at that particular side of things. Potential DHs, Yoenis Cespedes is still out there at age 35, Matt Kemp at age 36. When it comes to starting pitchers, the biggest one left is probably Rick Porcello, 32 years old, career 3.2, wins above replacement. You got Homer Bailey, 35 years old, Anibal Sanchez at the age of 37, Cole Hamels at the age of 37, Mike Leake, Jeff Samardzija at the age of 36, Trevor Cahill, 33 years old, so you do have some arms still available if people were to get injured. And then on the relief pitcher side of things, the biggest one, but comes with some controversy, Roberto Ozuna, only 26 years old, a ton of saves, closing experience, but of course has domestic violence background issues, so teams kind of shying away from that side of things. And then you have Shane Green at the age of 32, Brad Peacock at the age of 33 are really the only ones left to discuss. So not a ton of huge names. A lot of those guys would certainly be on big league minimum if they were to find an opportunity, but your club could still improve itself if somebody goes down with an injury or they're looking for a depth piece. There are names available out there to be had. So that'll wrap things up for segment number 1 here of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Kevin Mahalik. Appreciate you guys listening. We'll step aside now for a word from one of our sponsors and one of our sister shows, and when we come back, we'll get you guys up to date on all the news, notes, everything going on here across Major League Baseball. So stick around with us. We'll be right back.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back, and thanks for listening to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. Hopefully you guys had a great weekend out there. We're back at it here Monday, March 8th. We're getting closer and closer to opening day, less than a month away out there, and we have some news and notes to discuss with you guys here now in segment number 2. But before we jump into those, please do myself a favor, do yourself a favor. head to Twitter. Follow GSMC Baseball. Just type that into the search icon. It'll pop right up. Give us a follow. We'll keep you guys up to date on the latest and greatest out there in Major League Baseball. Everything going on. Hot takes, highlights, whatever it may be. We'll keep you guys up to date with everything you need to know. As well as Facebook, GSMC Baseball, LinkedIn. Follow the podcast network as well. That helps us continue to grow as a podcast network. So not only type in GSMC Baseball, but type in GSMC Podcast. That'll bring up the network page. You can follow along. If you guys are into anything else out there, I'm sure you are. You got hobbies, you're enjoying yourself, books, movies, whatever it is. Follow our pages, like, subscribe, rate, review, all that good stuff. We certainly appreciate it here within the podcast network. So what are we talking about here in segment number 2? A lot of news and notes to bring you guys, updates across Major League Baseball with, of course, one of the more positive news releases. And again, I feel happy even saying that, because every time I've talked to you guys about baseball being in the news, it's been for some sort of sexual abuse or, the Mariners guy talking down about how guys can't speak English, and everything's just kind of been so negative recently here over the past couple of weeks that it's just nice to have a positive news release and positive feedback from not only the baseball community, but the sports community. And what I'm talking about is the announcement of Lou Gerig Day is going to take place starting this summer and moving forward every June 2nd from here on out. And this, of course, is to bring awareness to the disease ALS, formerly known as Lou Gehrig's disease, which still to this point doesn't have a cure for it, which is kind of fascinating to me. I understand that, cancer doesn't have a cure yet, but ALS is 100% fatal when it comes to being diagnosed with ALS. I mean, we know people who have beaten cancer. We have treatments. Now, it's not like a pill or it's curable. We found a vaccine for the coronavirus, things along those lines. But ALS, we haven't even kind of made a groundbreaking discovery or a breakthrough when it comes to extending lives. Or it's just still fascinating that it can be the year 2021 and there's a disease out there that has been around now for 70, 80, 90 years, and it is still 100% fatal. And this is why I commend Major League Baseball for continuing to bring awareness and as well as trying to raise money to then donate for the cause to try to find a cure. And what's going to happen here, everybody remembers June 2nd, Lou Gehrig's famous speech where he was the luckiest man alive speech, even though he was diagnosed with ALS, that everybody has heard at least once, and you should watch every now and then on YouTube just to get chills throughout your entire body. But it's just fascinating with ALS. They're also going to wear a patch on every jersey. It's going to have the number 4, Lou Gehrig's number, and then 4 ALS. I like that very much as well. So everybody is going to be bringing awareness, monetary donations, raising money for a fantastic cause when it comes to ALS. So it's not an overwhelming disease. There aren't an astronomical amount of people diagnosed every year. I want to say it's roughly 5,000 to 10,000. So nowhere near the level of cancer, but certainly when something is 100% fatal, I think we need to all band together, come together, because a lot of times medical bills won't be covered. There's treatments that become very expensive, and it debilitates a lot of people, not only the person who has it, but a lot of families have a lot of trouble dealing with it. So Lou Gehrig's Day will be June 2nd moving forward. He will join Jackie Robinson and Roberto Clemente as the only 2 other Major League players who have a quote-unquote day dedicated to them and the cause that they stood for. So shout out to Lou Gehrig, shout out to Major League Baseball, everybody who kind of hunkered down and really made this happen. And June 2nd for ALS will, moving forward, be known as Lou Gehrig's Day. So certainly a round of applause for Major League Baseball for putting that together. And it's nice to have a positive news release out there in the world to talk to you guys about. So good work, Major League Baseball. Next on the list, we have Aaron Boone. He recently underwent surgery to have a pacemaker instilled with his heart. Now, he was born with a heart condition. He's had issues with his heart in the past. He had open heart surgery way back in 2009 when he was actually still playing. And so he's had issues. He's been aware of them. But most recently, he actually went to the hospital, admitted himself because he was feeling a little dizzy, a little lightheaded. And as news and more has become available, we're learning that his condition may have been worse than we initially thought. You know, when you first heard it on the news, hey, he's going in for surgery, he's getting a pacemaker, everything's good. But as details are emerging, his heart rate dropped into the 30s, 30 beats per minute. And that is nowhere near actual safe levels, because when you get to that level, you can have oxygen deprivation to your brain, to other parts of your body. So that can cause, obviously, defects within the brain and issues and strokes and things like that. So it can even be fatal when it gets to that particular level. So this pacemaker will be implemented, or has been implemented by the time you're listening to this, and it will kick into gear if his heart rate ever gets down below 50 to 60 beats per minute again, which of course keeps the oxygen in your body up to the point where you need it and where you need to be healthy moving forward. But it's a fascinating, again, time to be in, because we don't have any cure, 100% fatality for ALS, and yet inserting a pacemaker into your heart and your arteries is an outpatient procedure when it comes to the hospital. So Aaron Boone, as of this weekend, was already back at Yankees practice. He was already back throwing batting practice to some of the guys, around the guys, in the locker room. And you know, he doesn't have to be out for weeks on end, and it should take care of all of his issues. You know, again, I say should, just because, again, everything is not, 100% accurate or everything like that. But all the reviews, all the feedback from the surgery, that everything went well, everything is going according to plan. So moving forward, he shouldn't have these issues, they hope. He will continue to have reoccurring checkups and obviously things along those lines that you guys dealing with health issues know out there. I myself being diagnosed with melanoma a little bit over a year ago, caught it in time to where it didn't spread, but had to go through the surgery. And I still have checkups every 3 months just to, check my glands, check my skin, do internal CT scans, external dermatology visits. So you guys understand out there that even though you may have found something in time, it's certainly you need to monitor it over a longer period of time, continuing here moving forward. So shout out to Aaron Boone. Thoughts and prayers with him, his family. Once again, he is out. He is back with the Yankees down there in Florida. Should not miss any additional time. Should be good to go for the regular season. But thank goodness he got those things taken care of when he did, because, again, it could have led to a much larger issue if it weren't taken care of immediately. Next thing to talk about with you guys is the Cleveland Indians had to send 2 more players home for breaking COVID protocols. And you're probably thinking to yourself, are you talking about last year? No, I'm not. This is a new one, right? So last year, Mike Clevinger and Zach Plesac broke protocols during the regular season, and they had to be sent home to self-impose a quarantine or self-isolate for an extended period of time, 7 to 10 days. Well, this just recently happened again here in spring training. The Cleveland Indians had all-star third baseman Jose Ramirez, as well as slugger, Franmil Reyes. They had to be sent home because what did they do? How did they break protocol? Well, one, they went and got a haircut, which, again, I don't think breaks protocol. It was probably just indoors and too close in time together. But the big one that they broke was they went and had an indoor dinner down there in Florida. And even though indoor dining is now available wherever you are out there in the States, it's starting to become more and more available. In Pennsylvania, I think it's up to 25 or 40% capacity. Of course, Texas, Mississippi at 100% capacity. Florida, most likely somewhere in between. But it is still against protocols when it comes to Major League Baseball. And yes, even though these guys want to live their lives, they want to get a fancy dinner. They want to go out and have a nice dinner at a nice restaurant with nice ambiance and kind of get that normalcy back in their life. they're still not allowed to do this based on the agreement that the players in Major League Baseball have. So the Indians were open and said that these two guys were honest in their communication. They were upfront with what happened. They arrived on site Saturday, shared this detail, shared this information, and then were immediately sent home. They were not in contact with any other players, limited staff at that point, so they're not worried about a potential outbreak, but they do need to go home and isolate for, again, probably 5 to 7 days and come up with multiple negative tests before they will be back. And again, if they were playing games every day, this would be a much bigger deal. But of course, in spring training, they're just missing at-bats, they're just missing reps, and it's not a huge deal when it comes to across the league here. But one interesting thing was that Franmil Reyes was also one of these guys involved last year. I mentioned Plesac and Clevinger. Well, Reyes was also in a bit of hot water for a day or two because he was photographed maskless during a July 4th party in 2020. So my guy kind of had an issue last year. Now this spring, showing up again here with the issue. So not a great look for Reyes and continuing to break COVID protocol. But the kicker here, or the last part, is that there was a Chicago Cub who joined them at this indoor dinner. One of their friends, Chicago Cub Pedro Stroop, was with them at dinner, indoor dining. He was photographed with them in a since-deleted post, of course, which, again, guys, stop posting stuff when you're breaking rules. I mean, come on, seriously, you're just ratting on yourself. You got to be better than that. But so Stroop was also sent home for the foreseeable 5 to 7 days as the Cubs figure out what they need to do here moving forward to get the timelines right, waiting from the players, the CDC, trying to figure out MLB, what's going on. So 3 guys still currently in a bit of a tussle here when it comes to breaking COVID protocol and figuring things out. So along the lines of COVID and what's going on across Major League Baseball, there was a new release on the latest round of COVID testing that was available. And I just jotted down a couple of numbers because they're continuing to add on to the original release, which took place at the end of February when everybody initially was tested returning back to camp. And there were the weekly tests, the new weekly tests. They had 13,718 new tests, which came back with 5 positives. And all 5 of these individuals were players, and this is a positivity rate of 0.04%, which again is a positive thing for the players and for Major League Baseball, as they're trying to make sure that the protocols they have in place are working, things are not spreading throughout the clubhouse if there is a positive test. So again, that's a fantastic number. And then overall, with initial intake, monitoring tests, all of that, there were 34,541 tests given through, I believe it was March 5th, with 25 positives. There were 19 players and 6 staff members who in the last 2 weeks had tested positive, which is a 0.07% positivity rate, and also a good feeling within Major League Baseball. So again, 25 total positives, only 5 within the last week during monitoring testing. So things seem to be working, and it's good news for those of you out there hoping we're going to get a full Major League season in. So far, so good when it comes to getting this coronavirus under control and keeping COVID at bay here. And then the last thing to discuss with you guys here in the second segment is, did you guys see what Trevor Bauer did over the weekend? Trevor Bauer was pitching for the Dodgers against the Padres, and he was pitching with one eye closed. Literally, he had one eye closed throwing against the Padres. He threw 3 scoreless innings against the Padres with one eye closed. I mean, first response is, wow, he probably got hit around. Second response is, why the heck would he be throwing with one eye closed? What is going on there? So Bauer, of course, being the little troll that he is, he was quoted as saying, I figured if they can't score off me with one eye open, it's going to be difficult to score off me with 2 eyes open. Just having a little bit of fun. But he continued to dive in, and he did actually have a reason for what he was doing, and it's an interesting reason. It really is when you kind of break it down. He said, I like making myself uncomfortable and throwing different stuff my way and trying to find a solution for it. That's how you improve. find a way to make yourself uncomfortable, then get comfortable with it and do it again. He continued on. It turns out the quickest way to acquire a new skill is to force yourself to do that skill with a constantly changing environment, implement, or activity. If you can vary one of these elements every single time with the same goal, then your body acquires that skill more quickly. So he just was making himself uncomfortable, trying to still throw strikes, trying to work on his pitches, and he was still successful with 3 scoreless innings. So I don't anticipate seeing it during the regular season, but it certainly was funny and fascinating to watch him go out there with one eye closed and striking out Padres left and right and still having a dominant outing. So something to keep an eye out on Trevor Bauer here for the rest of spring training if he continues to tinker with things in his delivery and potentially even closing both eyes. Now, that would be dangerous, but hey, you guys get it out there. So that'll wrap things up here for segment number 2 of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. We'll step aside for a word from one of our sponsors and one of our sister shows, but when we come back, we're going to talk spring training, get into some injury updates, what's going on, as well as keep you guys up to date with all the standings going on out there. See who's going to win the Grapefruit League or the Cactus League. It's going to be a lot of fun. Stick around, everyone. I'm Kevin Mahalik. We'll be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Again, and thanks for listening to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. Appreciate you guys out there. Before we get into segment number 3, I'm going to take a moment to ask you guys to please rate and review the podcast wherever you're listening to this. Whether it's Apple Podcasts, Google Play, every podcast is available on YouTube as well. You got Spotify, Stitcher, Pandora, Alexa. There are more and more podcast platforms coming out, and GSMC Baseball is available on pretty much every one of them out there. So wherever you are, take a brief second, hit that star button all the way on the right for 5 stars. If you're on Apple Podcasts, hit subscribe, hit follow. If you're on Spotify, that way, whenever a new podcast is released, soon to be on a daily basis here moving forward, you guys will get that notification and it'll be pushed out to your device as soon as it's available to you out there. So, as well as, hey, check out the podcast network. There's a lot going on out there. GSMC Podcast Network. So just type in GSMC into that little search icon. Like I said, you're listening to this Monday. We're recording here Sunday night. The All-Star Game is taking place for basketball. You have hockey into the heart of their season. College basketball is about to hit March Madness. NFL free agencies coming up in a week. And if you're into more than just sports, we got health and fitness podcasts. We got book podcasts, movies, music, cars, politics, news, whatever it is that you're into. Just type in GSMC and you'll see a list of 10, 15, 20 different podcasts that I'm sure one of them is going to relate to you and what you like to do in your free time. So please rate and review this podcast. Check out the other ones. A lot of great hosts out there. We certainly appreciate you guys listening. Segment number 3 here. We're going to spring training mode when it comes to conversation. First, I want to kind of jump around some injuries that have taken place or individuals that are coming off of injury. I know we talked about guys who are going to make a difference this year when it comes to coming off an injury. In this segment, I really want to focus more on guys who are trying to get back into Grapefruit League action here moving forward. So, starting out with the Houston Astros. I touched on it briefly there in the top when I talked about the signing of Jake Odorizzi, but Forrest Whitley, the team's top pitching prospect, he's been diagnosed with a sprain of the UCL in his right elbow, his pitching arm. He's going for a second opinion now before he finalizes plans to get Tommy John, but upon first look, it was recommended that he gets the surgery, which of course would keep him out for all of this summer and potentially a bit of next year as well. So he'll try to get that second opinion done sooner than later, potentially needing surgery. And then you have Alex Bregman. Alex Bregman's getting closer to returning. He's dealing with a left hamstring issue. He's been going through full workouts with teammates. He talked about how he did most of the running, within this last percentile of what they did. And he says he's about 90% healed when it comes to his hamstring, but Houston's taking things slow. Doesn't want to force him back early because a hamstring's one of those issues similar to ankle sprains in football. If you don't let those heal completely, they'll just continue to grab, and all of a sudden you're dealing with the entire year of a hamstring issue. So Bregman, he seems to be close. We should see him in the next week or two. But again, he's been able to get some at-bats on the side fields and not in real live action yet, but simulated action. So it'll be fascinating to see when he gets back if he's able to jump right in or if he has a slow start to 2021 because he's missed some time with his hamstring issues. Next, you have Seattle. Unfortunate news for the Mariners, but I guess fortunate news for the front office based on our previous conversations around ownership, president, CEO. But Jarred Kelenic is going to be sidelined for the foreseeable future, probably looking at 4 to 6 weeks here. He's got a grade 2 strain of the abductor muscle in his left leg. He got an MRI over the weekend. He's the number 4 prospect in all of baseball. He tweaked his left knee coming out of the batter's box on Friday against the White Sox, got an MRI, and like I said, a tweaked muscle in his left leg. So he's going to miss some time, which, again, certainly he will not be available when it comes to opening day. They're not going to rush it with him. They originally were not going to rush it with him, which we all know now. But this will slow that timetable down even further. And I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see him until the month of May, because you give him 4 to 6 weeks to get back. Then you need 2 weeks of rehab time in the minors, probably extend that to a month. I'm looking at 2 months. So I'm looking at the month of June before we see the Mariners' top prospect out there in the outfield, which is a shame for all baseball fans because this guy was impressive. He had already gone deep in the spring, was showing out, again, number 4 overall prospect. So for him to miss extended time is certainly a bummer when it comes to all baseball fans out there. For the St. Louis Cardinals, they have Harrison Bader. He is out of Grapefruit League action since the 2nd. He's been dealing with a right forearm issue. The team is hopeful he's going to be back in a couple of weeks. It doesn't look like he's going to need surgery, and they basically shut him down for a week, and then they're going to try to ramp him up once again. But a barking, quote-unquote, right forearm is what's happening there in St. Louis for Bader. And then they also have Miles Mikolas. He's on track to throw a bullpen here on Sunday, the day of recording. He had to press pause for a week because he's had some right shoulder pain. So as of now, not huge issues for the Cardinals. A bit of tender forearm and tender shoulder, but nothing serious seems to be coming out. They shut guys down for about a week until they're going to ramp them up here and try to kind of start over when it comes to spring training. John Lester for the Nationals. He underwent thyroid gland removal surgery on Friday. He's set to fly back to Florida from New York on Monday here. He's been cleared after doing an intake test. He feels great now. He just needs to heal from the surgery, get back into his regular routine. Nothing extreme or emergency about it. Just needed to take care of an issue. So flew up from Florida, had the surgery, a couple of days off to get his wits. Now he's back down to Florida to join his team, and he certainly feels much better and feels like he could contribute here in 2021 and be successful in Washington. An update on Mike Soraka with the Braves. They refused to put a specific timetable on his return, but they think the right-hander could make a start before spring training ends, so it's relatively good news in Atlanta. They are not tying themselves to a specific date quite yet, in case he has a setback here over the next couple of weeks, but they did say that they are optimistic that they will see him out there on the mound before spring training ends for the Atlanta Braves. You have Max Stassi of the Los Angeles Angels. He's recovering from a hip procedure he underwent last year. He should make his Cactus League debut this next week. The 29-year-old catcher had a great offensive season last year, hitting .278, 7 home runs in 31 games. This was his second hip procedure in 2 years. First one was on his right. This one was on his left. So he says he feels better. He was quoted as saying it's day and night. He's got much more range of motion. Feels good to get in the squat. It's as good as he's felt in a long, long time. So a catcher having multiple hip surgeries before the age of 30, certainly a red flag, but it seems like everything for the near future is going well for Stassi. Then we have Brian Mata of the Boston Red Sox. He's their number 4 prospect, their top pitching prospect. He's been diagnosed with a slight tear in his UCL. They're taking a conservative approach. It doesn't look like Tommy John surgery just yet. I anticipate it will ultimately end up being Tommy John for Mata. So it's a bummer for the Red Sox having their top prospect undergo surgery, similar to the White Sox, or the Astros, if that's the way they go with Whitley. So stay tuned when it comes to Mata and ultimately which direction they go. Now for my Phillies. JT Realmuto, right fractured thumb. He got the cast off. It was on for 2 weeks like they had planned originally. Now they had to go back to the x-rays, make sure everything went well. They got a splint for mobility. He can't hit or throw just yet from his right hand, but he is still on time, it looks like, for an opening day return, according to all early reports. And then Adam Hazley. He went down with a core muscle injury, a groin core issue that's going to keep him out 4 to 6 weeks and certainly opens up center field for Scott Kingery or even Odubel Herrera to potentially make a move. For the Milwaukee Brewers, Devin Williams, who missed the postseason due to a right rotator cuff issue, it's looking like he will be ready for opening day. He said Friday he's getting close and everything has been going according to plan, so he should be making his spring training debut here in the next coming days. And then you have Luis Yurius. He exited Friday's game against the Rockies due to left hamstring discomfort. He was busted out a ground ball and took him out. As of now, they're saying it's precautionary, but again, he could probably miss maybe about a week for Milwaukee. And then lastly, we have Yasmani Dahl. He has not yet shown up for Cactus League. He's got a twisted right knee during running drills early in spring training camp. They're not giving a timetable, but saying every day's better than the last. They're going to be day to day, week to week, and not try to rush him back from an injury here for the White Sox, and more looking at the long haul when it comes to Grandal and his contributions to the White Sox this year. So that's it for the injuries. What's going on the field now? Where are we at with the standings? Of course, these standings mean absolutely nothing when it comes to the regular season. You can ask the Phillies, who are the reigning Grapefruit League champions and haven't made the playoffs in 10 years here. So spring training success definitely does not correlate to regular season success whatsoever, but I still like to kind of keep you guys up to date on who's doing what, where everybody stands here in spring training. Now that we're a week in, teams have about 6 games, 5, 6, 7 games under their belt, depending on schedule and availability. So as of Sunday night, we have the Miami Marlins and Detroit Tigers tied for first place. And that should tell you all you need to know about what I just said with spring training. If the Tigers and Marlins end the regular season in first place, I don't know what I'm going to do, but it's going to be something wild out there. A giveaway, a contest, or whatever it may be. A bet of some sort. Take the SATs, do something, right? Because that would just be completely outlandish. But Miami's 4-1 early on, and Detroit's 5-2. Detroit's got a plus 21 run differential, which is the highest out of any team out there in the major leagues, and certainly the highest in the Grapefruit League, which is the state of Florida is the Grapefruit League. And then behind them, you have some of your names. You got some of the big boys. The Mets are 3-2. Atlanta's 4-3. The Yankees 4-3. And Pittsburgh and Toronto all 4-3 at one game back of Detroit and Miami. The interesting one for me out of those squads is the Yankees, currently a -8 run differential, even though they are 4-3. But a lot of that came because they lost a game 15-0 to the Philadelphia Phillies. So, take that 15 out, and they're at +7, and things seem a bit more reasonable when it comes to 4-3. But the Pirates at a +10 run differential here through the first week. That's surprising to me as well. They're showing good work on the mound. The offense is having good at-bats. Now, again, they're not facing the top pitchers yet, and if they are, it's 1 to 2 innings, so, nothing to really write home about. But it certainly is nice to see from Pittsburgh early on having success if you're a Pirates fan out there. Next level in the Grapefruit League. Let's see here. We got St. Louis 2-2. Boston 3-4, Toronto 3-4, Philadelphia 3-4, and Tampa Bay at 3-4. And again, the Phillies have an even run differential, but they have one game at +15. So in the other games, they are 2-4 with a -15 run differential. And honestly, their pitching hasn't been that bad. So that's an offensive issue. Now, they don't have Real Muto. They've only had Harper for a game and a half, really. He had 3 at-bats over the weekend and only 1 game before that. So a lot of the regulars aren't in the lineup, but still, not a great start for them. Minnesota's -15 at 3-4. Similar issues there. Baltimore, Houston, and Washington down in the basement with Baltimore at -16. Now, Houston's 2-5 with a -1 run differential. So fascinating to see how they figure it out. But they have guys who have yet to make their debut there as well, like Bregman, Ryan Presley. A bunch of their key contributors haven't shown up yet when it comes to the spring. So fascinating to see Miami and Detroit at the top of the Grapefruit League. Now transitioning out to Arizona. Let's talk about the Cactus League here. Wrapping up segment number 3. You got the Kansas City Royals at 6-2, top of the list. +6 run differential, 1-2 in a row. Next, you got the Cubbies, the Rockies, and the Rangers at 4-2 at this point, a game and a half back. Colorado 4-2 with a -6 run differential, but nice to see the Rockies having early success. Then you're transitioning to about the 500 club. You got the Angels and Brewers at 4-3. Arizona, Cleveland at 4-4. The Dodgers, the A's at 3-3. With the one jumping out there is Milwaukee with a +16 run differential and a 4-3 record. The Dodgers currently are +4. The A's are +6. Arizona, Cleveland, and the Angels are all even when it comes to run differential. And then the bottom of the barrel here, we got San Diego, only 3-5 early on. But again, Yu Darvish looked good. The offense struggled against Bauer, but it's more so the pitching staff focusing on how they can continue to improve. And then the bottom of the barrel, Seattle, the White Sox, and Cincinnati. And Chicago at 1-4. I don't know if it's cause for concern quite yet, but I certainly didn't think the White Sox would struggle even in spring training with the depth of their organization and the prospects. Because, yes, they're loaded at the big league level, but their minor league system is still very, very good. So 1-4, but a -2 run differential, so haven't given up a ton of runs, or have given up a ton of runs. They've scored 26 and given up 28, so they're losing a ton of close games here early in spring training. So you got the Kansas City Royals, the Cubs, and Rockies at the top of the Cactus League, and Miami and Detroit at the top of the Grapefruit League. And once again, all this means absolutely nothing. I just wanted to let you guys know where everybody stands if you're not following along out there across the league. So that'll do it here for segment number 3 of the GSMC Baseball Podcast. I appreciate you guys listening out there. We'll step aside one last time here for a word from one of our sponsors and one of our sister shows. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. We'll take one last break, and we'll be right back after this.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
Welcome into the fourth and final segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. Thanks for listening today, everyone. I certainly appreciate it. Hopefully you guys had a great weekend out there. We're back to the grind here Monday morning. This week, like I mentioned, getting into 60, 65 degrees here in the Northeast. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Finally going to get all that snow to melt. See that green grass out there. Perfect time to get out, have some batting practice, as well as it should be the first week for spring sports. The high school season's out there. I know here in Pennsylvania, today's opening day when it comes to tryouts and high school spring sports. Of course, the college game's been going on for a couple of weekends now. More impressive outings from the Vanderbilt rotation, Rocker, future number 1 overall pick. You got Leiter Jr., Dyson guys up 5-6 innings. My Lehigh Mountain Hawks had a tough weekend down in George Washington against the Colonials. They'll look to bounce back moving forward. But, hey, you also got spring football going on. I've seen highlights of games taking place, the Patriot League, lower-level teams, of course, but there's a lot of sports action out there. So even though there may not be live regular season baseball yet, you guys can still get your feel across the nation when it comes to sports. So good luck to all you high school kids listening out there if today's your first day of practice or if you're just getting back from your first day of tryouts. Hopefully everything went well for you. And if you're in college and your year is in week 2, I know you guys are enjoying yourselves out there. So thanks for listening as always. Segment number 4 here. What are we getting into? Well, I'm going to continue my previews and predictions when it comes to the awards season. I talked to you guys first about MVP odds, the best bets out there, the best value. I then got into the Cy Young Award, the position where everybody's at, value, some long shots. We talked about what's next. Rookie of the Year I discussed, who could be the top candidate from every team out there. So to wrap things up and kind of the fourth award without getting into like Silver Slugger, Gold Gloves, things like that here, but I wanted to discuss potential candidates for Manager of the Year. Now, I wasn't able to find any gambling odds or futures bets when it comes to Manager of the Year. I guess this one doesn't get as much traction or as many bets as needed in order to get those odds here early and available for you guys like Cy Young or like MVP. But I wanted to talk to you guys about who I think is going to win the award. I like bringing up the predictions, where we're going from here. And I brought maybe 10 candidates from each league because this is really a team award when it comes to Manager of the Year. Because, again, even in the National League, yes, this year they won't have the designated hitter. So the National League will be back to managing the game a bit more than the American League because, of course, you get into double switches when it comes to defensively. Now, what does that mean? That means that if your sixth hitter, the number 6 hitter in your lineup, made the last out, you bring in a new pitcher. He's due up the next inning, 7, 8, 9. He's due up 9th, but you want him to go more than one inning. That means that you also bring in another defender. Say it was your third baseman who was hitting 6th and he made the last out. Well, you bring in a new third baseman. You also bring in a new pitcher, but you put the pitcher into the 6th hole and you put the third baseman into the 9 spot. So the pitcher isn't due up for the next 2, possibly 3 innings, and that third baseman gets the at-bat instead of the pitcher. Now, you remove your starting third baseman and your number 6 hitter, and that's why things get tricky, but it's also a lot more strategy. Okay, is this guy going 1 inning, or are we just going to pitch him and then pinch hit for him, and we're going to burn 2 guys in 2 half innings, or do we do a double switch, keep both of these guys in the game for longer, and continue to move forward that way? So that's where the old school style of baseball, a lot of older individuals like the National League style where pitchers hit. I fancy myself more on the American League side of things, even though I grew up a Phillies fan watching National League baseball. I always say, man, I'd much rather watch David Ortiz hit 3 to 4 times or Edgar Martinez hit 3 to 4 times than watch Aaron Nola or Vince Velasquez try to hit here moving forward, or try to lay a bunt down, potentially staring at 3 fastballs right down the middle and then walking back to the dugout. It's just, come on, give me the potential for some offense and some excitement, and that's why the universal DH seems to be gaining steam here year after year and will most likely be part of the next collective bargaining agreement moving forward. But I digress off of that. That's kind of a side point, but I just wanted you guys to understand what people talk about when they're saying the National League's more of a managerial job or a tougher job when it comes to the manager and what they need to take care of. So in the National League, we'll start out there when it comes to candidates here moving forward. I broke it down division by division when it comes to who I think has the best chance to win the award. And this is where it starts out extremely difficult. I mean, in the National League East, you guys heard my division-by-division breakdown or the chances that I think each team has, and I think 4 out of 5 of these teams could legitimately win this division. I know the Marlins made the playoffs last year. They got a nice rotation. I just don't think they have the depth offensively, and a lot of the arms are young, and I don't think they're going to be able to keep it up over 162, so I have them on the outside. But the other 4 teams, if somebody gets hot or if somebody else gets injured on the other side of things, and they make a run and win the division, I think it's going to be hard not to give them the award. Now, the guy I will say at the top of the list, Brian Snitker from the Braves, it's going to be difficult for him to win the award because he has the highest expectations going into 2021. I mean, the team made the NLCS last year. They've won 100-plus games the past couple of years, or were on pace based on winning percentage and would have won 100 games or so last year. So if the Braves come out and win 95 games and win the division, I don't think that's going to be enough for Snitker to win Manager of the Year, because it's where the expectation is for his team. A lot of times, Coach of the Year is given to the guy who's able to exceed, or his team is able to exceed expectations by a large margin, and it was because they were coached well, they were taught well, there was a change in the culture, a lot of different aspects. So I don't think Snitker would be a front runner to win the award. His odds would probably be relatively low, so I don't think you would grade value on that. But the other 3 gentlemen within this division, I think would be fantastic bets if you could find somebody to take it. Dave Martinez in Washington probably should have won the award 2 years ago. Definitely would have won the award 2 years ago if the postseason was included in voting for the award. Now, I understand why it is not. Certainly, you want to talk about the regular season, but again, they went on to win the World Series, so he did an outstanding job of managing the bullpen, the rotation during the entire postseason. But Martinez in Washington, if they bounce back, Scherzer stays healthy, Strasburg stays healthy, Corbin, Lester, Soto, all these guys, Schwarber, Bell, I mean, come on, they're loaded there. And if they come back, bounce back, and win this division after an extremely down year last year, I think he's going to be right at the top of that conversation. Right along those lines, Joe Girardi in Philadelphia. If the Phillies come out of nowhere and are able to win the National League East or be the first wild card or second wild card, because I think San Diego and LA kind of have that number 1 wild card locked up, but he's going to be in conversation. If they can finish over 500 for the first time in the last 7, 8, 9 years, he's going to be in that conversation. And a lot of it is going to do to his moves with the bullpen. Yes, Dave Dombrowski brings in the talent, but if Joe Girardi can manage this talent correctly, put these guys in the right positions to be successful, whether it's Alvarado left on left at 100 miles an hour, or Brandon Kinsler in the 8th inning, Archie Bradley closing, Hector Neris, you got Tony Watson coming from the left side, a lot of new pieces out there. And if they're successful with that bullpen in the National League, double switching, limiting guys, 3-batter minimum, it's going to be hard to keep Joe out of the conversation. He's won the award before with the Yankees, so he certainly knows what it takes to win. He's won a World Series. If the offense hits, the bullpen shows up, the rotation is just good or above average, Girardi's going to be right there. And then Luis Rojas in New York. Everybody knows what they've done this offseason with personnel, but if they can put it all together and win the division, if Lindor hits, Alonso hits again, Conforto hits, all of these guys put it together, and then, of course, DeGrom, Syndergaard, you got Stroman, you got that rotation, you got McCann, who you added. Whoever wins the National League East, I think has a really nice shot at winning this award. I think whichever team wins the National League East, if it's not the Atlanta Braves, is going to be right there with the Padres manager at the end of the year because, again, they're expected to take a huge leap forward. In the National League Central, I think it's a two-guy race who could potentially be involved. That's Craig Counsell in Milwaukee and Mike Shildt in St. Louis. I don't think the Cubs are going to be close to winning the division. I think the Reds are going to fall off, and of course the Pirates are in rebuild mode. So one of those two teams going to win the division, which puts the manager in conversation. I think Shildt and St. Louis, adding Arenado, if they put it together, Wainwright, Molina back, they're going to be solid. But Milwaukee, with their recent additions, if they surprise, win 90, 95 games, I think they're going to be at the top of that list as well. And then everybody out west knows it's a two-team race. I put down 3 names. You got Dave Roberts for the Dodgers. I don't think he wins it based on expectations. Jayce Tingler in San Diego, he's the early front runner across the board. When you ask any experts if they overtake the Dodgers or win 100, 105 games, even if they're a wild card, he's going to be right there in conversation. And then an outside candidate, Gabe Kapler in San Francisco. I have him potentially available if they're somehow able to sneak into that second wild card role. It's going to be tough to knock Kapler and what he's doing out there with a team that's probably not as talented as the others we discussed. So I'm going to go with Jayce Tingler, of course, San Diego. They win 100 games, finish second, but he still wins the award when it comes to Manager of the Year in the National League. Now transitioning over to the American League. This one's kind of wide open in my opinion. In the AL East, you got Kevin Cash in Tampa Bay, won the award last year. Tampa lost some guys. If they're able to still be a machine and contribute, he's going to be right back there. You have Aaron Boone in New York. If New York's a monster, if they're a machine, 100, 110 wins, he's at the top of the list when it comes to candidates. And then lastly, you have Charlie Montoyo. He could have won the award for what he did last year with Toronto. And if they continue to take that next step, as I think they will as a surprise team in the American League, he's going to be a big reason why. So I think Montoyo is probably the top contender in the American League East, just because I think Toronto's going to finish second, and Aaron Boone and the expectations for New York are high enough to where they won't exceed them to the point where he's going to get the jump on everybody else. Then you go to the American League Central. The White Sox, Tony La Russa, they fired last year's Manager of the Year when they exceeded expectations, and now I think they're going to exceed them once again based on the win totals. But I don't think a lot of guys are going to want to vote for Tony La Russa. It's just a gut feeling and understanding he's probably going to be in consideration, but I don't think he's going to win it. Just something's telling me it's not going to be him. If the Twins are still able to win this division, Rocco Baldelli from Minnesota is certainly going to have a great argument. I think the White Sox should be favored. They're going to be right there. Cleveland, I think, has a down year. I wouldn't put Terry Francona in the conversation, but I like Mike Matheny in Kansas City. If somehow Kansas City, projected to get 70, 71 wins, gets to that 80, 85 mark, fights for that second wild card, Matheny's going to be a guy talked about in Kansas City. He had success in St. Louis, obviously had some issues as well, but if they're able to exceed their win total by 10 games, it's going to be tough to not talk about Mike Matheny as the potential winner in the American League. And then out west, it's similar to the National League East. I think the American League West is wide open when it comes to a division. The only team I don't see contributing out there is the Texas Rangers. I think you could just pencil them into that 5th spot, but the other 4 guys in Oakland, they lost a ton of guys. They make the playoffs every year, Moneyball style. Are they going to be right back in it after completely revamping that bullpen. They lose arms, they bring arms in. So Bob Melvin for Oakland is a candidate for me who I think is going to get big-time consideration if they're able to win the American League West and get back to the postseason. You also have Dusty Baker in Houston. I think Houston's the favorite out west, but if they somehow crush everybody else, get to 90 wins, 95 wins, losing Valdez at the top of the rotation, losing Verlander, I think Dusty Baker's going to have a solid argument. Then you have Joe Maddon out in L.A. If he can get the Angels back to the playoffs for the first time in X number of years, if he can get Shohei Ohtani to produce, Albert Pujols to produce in the last year of his contract, I think Joe Maddon's going to be right there. And certainly he's won the award before. He was excellent in Tampa Bay. He was excellent in Chicago. So fantastic manager, just needs to put it all together out there in L.A. And then lastly, similar to Kansas City, Scott Servais out in Seattle. I mean, they're my surprise team. Now with injuries and everything going on out there, maybe not anymore. But if Seattle's able to get into that second wild card conversation, beat up on some other guys in the division, how can you not put Servais right in that conversation? So who's going to win the award in the American League? Personally, based on my projections, where do they have them? I think La Russa and Boone are going to get a lot of the conversation because the White Sox and Yankees are going to be 1-2. But I like Charlie Montoyo in Toronto. I have Toronto as that first wild card team. I think they're going to surprise people, continue to develop, and similarly to the National League with Tingler as the number one wild card, but having 100-plus wins, I think if Montoyo can get to 90, 95 wins, get that number one wild card, that's certainly going to exceed Blue Jays fans' expectations, and he's going to be right there to win the award. So I'm going Montoyo, I'm going Tingler, but the NL East and the AL West, if somebody pulls away in those divisions and really impressive, I like those guys as potential dark horse candidates to win the awards here moving forward. But that'll wrap things up for today's show. Hopefully you guys liked it out there. It was a fantastic episode. We talked about the updated signings and free agency. Jackie Bradley Jr., Jake Odorizzi find a home. There's still a couple of free agents available out there if your team's looking. Then we talked about Lou Gerig Day being implemented on June 2nd, moving forward here. New COVID updates, Trevor Bauer, the Indians players being a bit of jokesters, going out, getting indoor dining. Then we did an injury update, spring training conversation, and of course, giving you guys more winners here when it comes to Manager of the Year awards. But that'll do it for today's episode. If you guys are still listening, very much appreciated. I love the end of the podcast squad here. So one last time before I get out of here, I'll ask you guys, rate and review the podcast, leave a comment, leave a 5 stars. That really does help us out continue to grow. And it'll just take a second for you to click that star there all the way on the right side on Apple Podcasts. But that's it for today's episode, Monday, March 8th. Hopefully you guys have a fantastic weekend out there. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik, as always, and I'll talk to you guys again on Thursday.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.